All right, I think we should be good to get started now. So thanks everyone today for joining us for our cannabis industry webinar, which is the fourth one that we've hosted in this summer series. My name is Quentin Eden and I'm an account manager at Newcomp Analytics. So I'll just start with some quick introductions and then I'll pass it off to one of our consultants, Jason, who will be taking us through the process of building out his workflow and then looking at his findings. So before we get started, I wanted to mention that this session will be recorded and sent out afterwards. As well, we'll also be sending out the data and workflow if you want it, so that you can try to do the workflow on your own and look at the kind of analysis that we did. So when we were coming up with ideas for this summer series, this is one of the ones that we got really excited about. Obviously, being a Canadian firm, it's such an interesting and emerging industry that everyone's keeping tabs on. So we thought it would be interesting to start thinking about how cannabis organizations as well as regulators could use analytics. So I'll let Jason get more into the type of analysis that he's going to be doing in a couple of minutes. But overall, we really just wanted to look at what type of data and insights would be important to the cannabis industry and how could we use Alteryx to prepare data and do analytics. So just to give a brief overview of Newcomp, for those of you who don't know us, we've been in the industry for over 25 years now, and we're solely focused on all things analytics. So we help clients every step of the way, whether it be strategic roadmaps to figure out what's the next step, what's the low-hanging fruit that we should be going after. If you're looking at different software and trying to figure out what would be the most helpful based on your organization, budget, everything, and really helping to choose the right software. We do full consulting services for implementations, staff augmentation, just helping you with the projects that you're working on, as well as we have a very large training practice, and we also do mentoring. So analytics, it's a really hard thing to do, but we want to be a trusted advisor and help you along the way. We partnered with Alteryx about 2 years ago when they were just starting out in the Canadian marketplace, and over the last couple of years, it's just been amazing to see the growth and how much our clients love Alteryx, whether they're using it as a full ETL tool or prepping data before putting it into their visualization tool, automating very manual, difficult Excel processes. They're doing some really cool advanced analytics stuff. It's super versatile. So one of the nice things is that it's all code-free, but if you want to bring your own code in, that's completely possible. It's as simple or as complex as you want it to be. So you'll see on the side we have 5 pillars of analytics that we focus on. So we consider those to be business intelligence, data visualization, information management, so everything from data governance to building data warehouses to ETL processes, planning, budgeting, forecasting. So how do we integrate these analytics into our plans and our budgets, advanced analytics, and open source. Our job as an Alteryx Premier partner is really to make sure that you're successful with Alteryx through enablement and help integrate Alteryx within your existing analytics processes and ecosystem and really help you from an end-to-end standpoint. So with that said, I'll pass it over to Jason to introduce the topic and start on the demo.
Hi guys, my name's Jason. I'm a data analytics consultant at Newcomp Analytics. And today I'll be going through the demo. What we're going to do today is first talk about why we're creating this workflow. Second, we're going to explore a mock cannabis company's operations that I created myself. And the bulk of the demo will be done creating a workflow in Alteryx. And finally, we're going to create some dashboards in Tableau to display some of the insights that we've gained from our Alteryx workflow. So why do we create this workflow? We create it to keep a record for audit purposes. This can be either for internal audits to verify all procedures are maintained properly, or it can also be for an external audit from, say, a consulting company or a government regulator. The workflow can also serve as a real-time safeguard in the case that some products slip through some procedures. Let's say, and this is not inspired by any recent activity in the cannabis space, but let's say you don't have have the proper licenses to sell some product, and that product slips through some stages of your manufacturing and supply chain. Well, an Alteryx workflow, when properly set up, would be able to alert you to such activity before it gets into the hands of customers. We also want to use it to link data from different areas of the manufacturing and sales process. Having a single Alteryx workflow will enable you to not only link your data from different departments, but also make it much easier to gain. And finally, another point that I want to break up is that having this workflow and having the resulting data can be used to obtain insurance quotes from underwriters. This would most likely be the case for directors and officers insurance, product recall insurance, and other insurance. See, say you don't have an Alteryx workflow and your data is separated by department. And an underwriter is trying to not only learn your business, but also organize your messy data at the same time. Now imagine instead, you send them a well-organized data structure courtesy of Alteryx workflow. In this case, the underwriter's mind would be at ease when they review your data for potential risks. And they'd probably say to themselves, hey, well, we'll have to review this account every year come renewal season. And if it's going to be this easy to read through the data and assess risk, we can offer an insurance rate that reflects the reduced workload required on this account. So introducing the mock cannabis company's operations that I've created for today. First, I'd realized that this is a gross oversimplification of what it takes to grow cannabis and get it ultimately into the customer's hands. But due to the limited time today, it just had to be simplified. The manufacturing process of this cannabis company involves 6 different parts represented by the circles in this diagram. First, you have your grow, then you have your grow quality assurance, packaging quality assurance, shipping, and finally, customer feedback. You'll notice that in each of these, there are some blue check marks. And that is to demonstrate that in the Alteryx workflow we're going to create, there's a quality assurance test algorithm that tells us, did our product pass or fail regulatory standards? For instance, if you look under the grow quality assurance, so the second bubble in this diagram, you can see a few levels that regulatory bodies might be interested in knowing what's in your product. THC levels, bug levels, mold levels, and pesticide levels. To illustrate how this test will work, I've created this slide. And you'll see you have your batch of your grow, and you're taking a little test sample. In our case, we're going to use 10% of our test sample, and it's gonna see if our THC levels are below the mandatory regulatory levels. And then it's going to determine if it passes or fails. Great, so now that that's out of the way, I'll now open a blank Alteryx canvas. And for some of you who've already seen this might be a bit of a review, but I know some people in this webinar have probably never seen Alteryx, so I'll just take a few minutes to introduce the tool. This white area here, where it says drop tools here, is called a canvas. This is where you're gonna drag and drop tools to create your workflow. Tools are at the top here. And all of these tools are color-coded depending on different parts of the data analytics process. So first, we have our favorites ribbon. These are all the tools that I use most often that I like to have at my disposal. Then we have in and out. This is for importing and exporting data. We have preparation, probably my favorite palette, just because there's so many possibilities to transform your data and prepare it for analysis. We have join, parse, and transform. And then, of course, you have all of these. These are more custom, but for the standard tools, you'll use these 5 palettes. So to begin, we're going to create an Alteryx workflow. To create your Alteryx workflow, first you need to bring in some data. To do so, I'm going to use this tool called input data. I'm simply going to drag and drop it onto the canvas. Now you'll notice that when I dragged and dropped it, this window right here changed to have different configuration settings. This is called the configuration settings window. And for this case, because it's an input data tool, it's going to ask us what file we want to connect to. To find the file, I'm going to hit this drop down. You can see there's a lot of options. We have just any flat file, Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, Hadoop, other databases. For this case, we're going to use just a flat file. And I'll give you guys a quick preview of what this file looks like in Excel, just so that everyone can see it. So we have a unique batch ID number, depending on what batch of cannabis we're growing, the date it was planted, the date it was cultivated, the grams that were planted, the average temperature, average humidity, the amount of times we watered it, and the amount of times we used pesticides on it. And finally, we have this weed type, which I must confess, I came up with these on my own. Please don't laugh at my expense. But yes, when we look at this data set in Alteryx, we'll notice that we already have this same preview that we'd see in Excel. To get a further preview of your data, it's best practice in Alteryx to use another tool whenever you input data. This tool is called the Browse tool. I'll drag and drop it onto the canvas. And to connect your tools, it's as easy as clicking on the arrow and dragging it to the other tool's connector. Now it says no data available, use Control-R to run this workflow. That's because whenever you bring in a tool and you want to make a change to your workflow, Alteryx won't automatically run your workflow. You have to tell it to. So you can either press Control-R, or you can press this convenient run button at the top right here. I'll hit run. And we'll see now that our configuration window has actually changed to some stats about our data set. Right now, this stat is about batch ID. But as we look at our data at the bottom right here, we can actually click on different fields of our data to show different stats about it. So this is grams. Now, if we go to weed type, we can actually see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different kinds of weed, and that this Stairway to Heaven and wing clip represent the grand majority of it. It's quite a useful tool just to get a good idea of your data set. So now that I've shown you how to bring data by using the input data tool, I'm going to show you a different way to do it. I'm simply going to go to my Excel file and drag and drop it into Alteryx. Alteryx will automatically tell that it's a select Excel input. And voila, we've brought the data into our workflow. Now this is a very simple Excel file, and it's basically levels for our test. So let's imagine that a regulatory body told us that our product cannot have above these amounts for our tests. And it talks about THC, bug, mold, pesticides. Now this number is an arbitrary number, but it could be a percentage, it could be a frequency, but in this case, it's just an integer. Now our goal in this Alteryx workflow is to create one data set for the end of this workflow. To do so, I'm going to have to combine these two data sets that I've brought in together. I'm going to navigate to the join palette, and I'm going to choose a tool called Append Fields. I'm going to connect it. And then you can see you have a bunch of options here that you can select your data. You can change the data type, so string, integer, date, and you can also rename your data at the same time. This is very useful if you have a data set that's extremely large and you want to conserve some memory. You can get rid of some of the fields that aren't required. So when I hit run, you'll notice that there's an arrow on the right here. This is the results. But I can also preview what is coming in from this T and what is coming in from this S by clicking on it. And you'll notice it's just our two data sets. When I click on this results, now you'll notice that our data sets have been combined. And for every unique batch ID, we now have the accepted levels for THC, bug, mold, pesticides, and packaging, all the way down. Great. Now, another tool I want to introduce you to is the select tool. This select tool was also embedded in this append tool, but I just want to take a second to introduce it to you. This is really the bread and butter for selecting the fields that you want. You can select what fields to take out and select what fields to rename. You can also, in this tool, add a description to your data. So for instance, if you wanted to pass this workflow on to someone else, it might be useful for them to have a short description of what each field is. Okay, now we're going to use a formula tool. And the purpose of this formula tool is to create grams tested, basically a test sample of what we're going to test. I'm going to hit add column, and I'm going to name this column grams tested. In order to reference previous fields, you start with a left square bracket, and now you can see Alteryx will automatically suggest to you the different fields. In this case, it's going to be grams times 0.1 for 10%. Then the final step for creating this field is to choose what data type you want it to output as. In this case, integer 64 will do just fine. I'm going to create an additional column, and I'm going to call it grams remaining after growth test. And for this, we're going to once again use our initial grams, and we're going to minus it from our grams tested. And I'll change it to int64. So I'm going to run this. Oh, and we have a little error. One second.
Have an extra bracket there, Jason, in the grams remaining.
Thanks, Quentin. Okay, so grams tested, growth test. Thanks, Quentin. Okay, so you can see when you write down the formulas in your formula tool, you can actually have a little data preview, which is very helpful for when you're writing your formulas to tell if it's going to error out or not. Or for instance, if instead of 10% you wrote 10, then you'd see that clearly the grams tested is way too much. It's 51,000, when really what you want is something that is smaller. So 0.1, that's 500. That's a lot more realistic. So we'll hit run. And now we'll see that our data set now has the 2 additional columns that we just created called grams tested and grams remaining, which is great. Now we're ready to input our growth quality data. So I'm going to go to another Excel file. And this Excel file contains, once again, the unique batch IDs, the date that the growth quality test was taken, and finally the results of these tests. So we have our THC levels, our bug levels, our tested mold levels, and our tested pesticide levels. So I'm going to bring this file into Alteryx. And now I'm going to join this into our main data set. To do so, I'm going to use a different tool this time called join. And for those who took stats, this is probably more familiar to you. You have an input called a left join. You have an input called a right. And the outputs are for left joins, inner joins, and right joins. In the configuration screen, you'll see that there's different options for joining your data. In this case, because both fields have batch ID, I'll select batch ID, and you'll see Alteryx automatically added batch ID from the other data set. You can also, once again, choose if you want to keep some fields or get rid of some fields. In this case, we have batch ID showing up twice. You have it down here, then you also have it up here. We only need the batch ID once, so we can get rid of this and move forward using less computer memory. So I'll hit run. And what we're interested in is this inner join. Because now you can see that we've added to our main data sets the test data. What was the results of the THC levels, bug levels, mold levels, and pesticide levels? Now that that data is put together, we can use a tool called the filter tool. To use this tool, you have to select what column you're interested on filtering on. So in this case, I'm interested on tested THC levels. And I want to know, is my tested THC level bigger or equal to a number? So that's great. So you could write down any number here. But really what we're interested in is using those accepted levels that we have in this data set. And since we've already brought this data set into our main data, we can actually directly reference this in the filter tool using a custom filter. So we have what we had originally in our basic filter already written out. Is our tested THC levels smaller or equal to? the accepted THC levels. And are our tested bug levels smaller or equal to accepted bug levels? And are tested mold levels smaller or equal to accepted mold levels? And finally, our last test, accepted pesticide levels smaller or equal to accepted pesticide levels. Oops, I hit this accepted twice. Tested pesticide levels. So what this statement is basically saying is that if any of these tests fail, then it will be a failure. My apologies. If any of these tests, if all these tests pass, then it will be a pass. If they fail, it will be a failure. And these fails and passes are demonstrated by these two outputs. So you have a true output and a false output. To illustrate in our data that all these batch IDs pass and all these batch IDs at the bottom failed, we're going to use another formula tool. I'm going to add a column and I'm going to call it grow test. Pass. And for the bottom, I want to have an almost identical tool. And to do so, instead of creating a new tool, I can simply press copy and paste, drag it down, and then modify it. So in this case, we don't want pass, we actually want fail. I'll hit run to show you guys exactly what this did. You'll see in our top one for the past, we'll see that these grow tests all passed, and there's now a new field reflecting this. And in our failed, there's now a new field also reflecting that this grow test has failed. To join these two data sets together, we're going to use another join tool that is called union. And what union basically does is sandwich your data together based off of their names. So because both of our data sets have the exact same names on their fields, we're able to stack them on top of each other using this union tool. I'll hit run, and you'll see exactly what I mean. We now have in our grow test some that pass and some that fail. We're basically back to our original grow data set, but we've just added a whole bunch of more information for further analysis. So now that I've shown you how to import data, join data, and create a small algorithm to determine if it passed or failed our growth quality assurance tests, I'm going to show you an example of a workflow that I've created that will go through the other departments and other steps of the cannabis supply chain. You'll see in this workflow, we have the exact same workflow that we created, grow and grow quality assurance. I've actually placed it in a container so that you can easily clean up your workflow and display other parts of your workflow. But now we also have a similar algorithm for packaging and packaging quality assurance. We have shipping. And finally, we have customer feedback. Now we're going to post this Alteryx workflow to our website. So you'll be able to review this and send me any questions or send Quentin any questions. But for today's sake, it would be impossible to make this complete workflow step by step. But I will press run. And I'll show you a bit of the resulting workflow or resulting data. We have our original grow data. We also have our date package. So package data, we have our storage type, either freezer outside or fridge. We have our type of packaging. Then we have, again, our packaging tests. So we test for bugs. We test for, was it a failed package? Then we have our shipping dates, always very important. Who bought the product? What was the price that they paid? What was their location? And finally, after the fact, we now have our customer complaint counts per batch. We have our customer sentiment, and then we have the revenue that we have from each of our batches. So now I'm going to show you guys some dashboards that I created in Tableau. Or first and foremost, I'm going to show you how to create a dashboard in Tableau. So you'll see I've imported that final data set that we created in Alteryx. And Tableau has a very similar way of showing off data sets, just like Excel does. You can review all of your data. And then to create a new sheet in Tableau, you simply click on the tab, similar to Excel. I've pre-named this Monitor Quality by Complaint. And also a disclaimer, I've pre-organized this data into convenient folders. This is something that Tableau does not automatically do, but it definitely does help when you have a lot of data fields to be able to organize your thoughts. So to create this visualization, we're going to use a field called Grow Test. We can see a grow test can either be failed or passed, just like our algorithm created. We're going to take weed type and drag it to rows. Now we have a bit of a pivot table. And finally, we're going to go down to number of records and bring it to the table. We now have a preview of what's going on in our grow tests and what weed types are failing more often than not. But we can also add a little bit of color to this. So if I hold control and I drag this number of records to color, Tableau will actually sort these by color. You can see the larger ones are darker and the lighter ones are light. I personally do not like this color palette, so I'll change it. And here we go. That's a bit more revealing. So that's great. The other sheet that I'm going to show you how to do is a map sheet. So I'll name this one map. And under shipping, we have a field called location. When we double click location, it will bring up all the states in the United States. And that is because this location field has a data type for a geographical role called state and province. Now, what we can do is actually take our revenue and drag this to color to get an idea of what's going on with our revenue. You'll notice that California has 46, and on the smaller scale, we have a 7. Obviously, these 46 and 7 numbers are not proper for our analysis. This is a count of our revenue, the amount of times that we've recorded a revenue. What we actually want is to use a summation. So to do so, you can just go down here and press sum, and now we can see we have a better view of what we're looking at. You can also put this in our tooltip. Okay. So now that you guys have seen the gist of Tableau, I've actually created some more advanced dashboards that we can preview. And the first one is called Internal Quality Control. So this is a dashboard for some very simple pivot tables that can just give you an idea of how your tests work. First, we have our grow tests by weed type that we created before, but we also have a packaging test. So again, we have our weed type, we have our failed and passed, but we've added another dimension, and that is the type of packaging. In this case, it's heavy, light, medium, or light and medium. Okay. We have filters on this side, and that is if we want to take out some specific types, we can do so. Now, this might not be very impressive right now to look at this because we only have 6 different kinds of weed types. But imagine you had 200 types. It might be good to be able to filter out the ones that you want to see on your visualization. We can also use a year filter to determine what years we want to look at. Now, this is a relative date filter, just one of the many ways you can slice and dice your data in Tableau. We can use this year, we can use previous year, and we can use next year. The second dashboard is a revenue report dashboard. So this is, in my eyes, more compelling. We have our lost revenue, our sum of revenue, and our total potential revenue. Now up here, I've added a little description of what lost revenue is. So lost revenue is the result of losing grams due to failed tests. So if your product fails the tests, our grow and packaging quality assurance tests, then they're permanently destroyed, and that hurts your bottom line. So this graphic basically just shows you this is the $10 million that you could have had if your product didn't fail the tests. And the business decisions that you might make off of this are, okay, we're losing $10 million to these tests. Maybe we need to invest in storing our product better so there's less mold, or getting better packaging so our packaging doesn't rip, in order to tap into this $10 million. You can see we also have a map. And this map is actually of lost revenue. So for California, we can see it has the largest at 2.5 million, but you can also browse by individual state. You'll notice that this state right here, Alabama, actually has no sales, so you actually can't drag over it. Okay, finally, to end my part of the demo, I've created a few scenarios that might be interesting to you guys. So scenario 1, a regulatory body changes the acceptable mold level from 4 to 2. So this is tougher regulations. What you can do is you can go to your accepted levels data sheet and change your mold to 2. Save it, close it, And when we run our workflow, it's now going to change what we see in Tableau. So when I return to Tableau and I refresh my data, oh, this is not the property one. Sorry about that. Let's run it. Data source, refresh. You can now see that if a regulatory body was to change the amount of pesticides from 4 to 2 that are acceptable, we've now lost $31 million, and we would only have had $12 million. So with this, you can build some scenarios, and as risk managers, this can be a very helpful tool to be able to tell how much money you'd lose based off of regulatory changes. The second scenario, you have a hunch that a particular product has a lot of customer complaints, but you're not sure how to check. So for this, we can actually do the analysis in Tableau, or in Alteryx. We have a data set here of all the customer complaints that you've received. So for this batch ID, we have the data feedback, the buyer, and the reason for complaint. We have either packaging rip, no effect, or bugs. To do analysis on this data set, we're going to use a new tool called the Summarize tool. And this tool basically does a nested sort, or as some people who have used SQL know, it's a group by. So I'm first going to choose what I want to sort on. So I want batch ID. I'm going to do group by batch ID. I'm going to group by reason for complaint. And then I'm going to do a count of reason for complaint. Oh, when I run this, you'll notice that now we have a new side data set that has our batch ID, reason for complaint, and the amount of counts that it has. You can see that there are some nulls. So actually, we can get rid of this null really easily by using a formula tool. Or not formula tool, a filter tool. So batch ID is not null, run. Now we've gotten rid of the nulls. And finally, the final step is to sort on complaint counts. So we're going to sort on complaint counts, descending. And now we can see that we might have a problem with this batch ID. We've had 541 total customer complaints about bugs. It might be time to consider recalling this product before a regulatory body picks up on it and forces you to recall the product. It's always better to get ahead of it, right? So this is a very powerful tool to get ahead of it. Finally, my last scenario. You want to predict if a certain storage type leads to higher levels of mold in test samples. So that's a good theory, right? If you're keeping something outside or if you're keeping something in the freezer, would this change the amount of mold that's in your product? To do so, we're going to use our two packaging data sets. So this first data set has our dates, or our batch ID, our storage type, or type of packaging. Really what we're interested in is the storage type. And then this one has our mold levels that we got from our test. So first, I'm going to join this data. And then I'm going to use a linear regression tool. And in this linear regression tool, our target variable, oh, sorry, I just need to combine those. Our target variable is going to be mold levels, and our predictor is going to be storage type. So I'll select run. And when I look at this output, it's going to direct you to bring a browse tool into the workflow. So I'll bring this browse tool. I'll hit run one more time. And now we can see a standard linear regression table. And to no surprise, our results make sense. So if we have our product sitting in a freezer, we'll have an estimate average of 1, just a 1 mold level. If you have it in your fridge, there'll be an estimated average of 2.8. And then finally, if you have it sitting outside, your mold level will have an estimated level of 7. So that's the 1 plus 6. So this will give you some insights on maybe you need to store your product in a freezer or fridge, because putting it outside is definitely hurting your bottom line. Okay, guys, thank you very much for listening to me. I'm now going to relaunch this PowerPoint and ask if there are any questions.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jason. So yeah, we were monitoring the questions and we answered a couple things throughout. So don't know if we need to go through them. The one that came up a couple times was just if we're going to be sending out the data, and we're actually going to be taking that to the next level. So we'll be sending out a Google Drive link that's going to have the workflow that you can explore on your own and see what was done through that big workflow. It's going to have the data sets. So you'll get all of that. So if we move on to resources, which is the next slide, one of the best things that you can do if you were interested is actually an Alteryx trial. So it's a free trial, and once you've downloaded it, you can actually reach out to us if you just want to talk about potential different use cases or want a little bit of help building a workflow, and we're happy to do that. At no charge. We want to make sure that you're able to find use cases. So one of the nice things about Alteryx is that it's one of those tools that in a very small amount of time, often just a day or two, you're able to create a workflow that brings a ton of value. We hear from our clients all the time that they were able to take some data prep process or some Excel process that used to take them a day or two, and they bring it down to a 10-minute process in Alteryx. So those are the things that get us really excited, and we hope that we're able to work with you to find those types of use cases. If you wanted to go deeper into the Alteryx platform, or if you're already using it, we do offer official courses. So we have a full course list of Alteryx courses. We built our own course about using Alteryx with Tableau if you're doing that. So those are all available on our website. Lastly, if you just flip to the next slide, is the analytics boot camps that we offer. So these are a lot of the things that are getting buzz in the market right now: data lakes, APIs, machine learning. So what we like to do is just a very, if you're interested in learning more, thinking about how you're going to be able to use it in your organization, we have boot camps that really introduce you to the topics, get hands-on with it, and see what the tools and methodologies in those areas are. So we have a full outline of what those boot camps entail on our website. So If you're interested in any of those, I would definitely recommend checking it out. We're a little bit early, so we'll give you back 8 minutes of your day. And thanks everyone again for joining, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one.